Live from the Ritz-Carlton, St. Louis, HEC Media is proud to present Growing Global, the World Trade Center St. Louis's annual meeting. Now, here is your host, Brenda Madden.
Hello and welcome to HEC Media's live stream coverage of Growing Global 2018, presented by World Trade Center St. Louis. We are joining you now from the main ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton St. Louis in beautiful downtown Clayton, where guests and panelists are settling in for today's event. Our moderator for today's proceedings is Debbie Monterey from KMOX Radio, and she will be joining us and getting things started in just a few moments. But first, we're going to begin today with a welcome from Andrew Walshaw, Board President and Director of Private and Commercial Banking at Northern Trust, and Board President of WTC St. Louis.
My name is Andrew Walshaw. I have the privilege of serving as President of the World Trade Center's Board of Directors and as the Senior Vice President for Northern Trust. What an unbelievable audience we have today. This is officially a record in attendee and sponsor support for Growing Global. On behalf of my fellow board members and World Trade Center staff, thank you for your generous support of our work and our mission. For more than 25 years as the International Division of St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, World Trade Center has supported growth for the region's business, most importantly, ensuring St. Louis companies are represented in an increasingly global marketplace. From customized research to trade trading, hosting inbound and outbound trade missions, and managing St. Louis's foreign trade zone, St. Louis Mosaic Project, and sister cities, the World Trade Center brings together a strong system of business and government agencies to support trade and foreign investment and enhance St. Louis's global connectivity. Each year, we gather here to celebrate St. Louis's role in the global economy and address timely issues affecting internationally focused companies. I think it's safe to say that today's topic is quite timely. We are honored to host three distinguished panelists from our leading trading partner countries for a discussion on the political economy of trade. From trade wars to a renegotiated NAFTA, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm sure you are too. Before we get to lunch in today's program, it's my pleasure to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the World Trade Center's parent organization, the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, Sheila Sweeney. Sheila?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Growing Global. It's the World Trade Center's premier event to celebrate St. Louis's global relevance and connectivity. Our region's multinational companies are among our best advocates for St. Louis, so thank you to the business community for supporting today's event. We have many returning sponsors year after year, and we thank you for that, but we also have one very important new sponsor this year, one of the world's leading global firms, Bayer. So we welcome your team to St. Louis and look forward to getting to know you. We know you will be such an important part of the future of St. Louis, and we really want to work hard with you. We're still trying to get you that nonstop flight to Frankfurt, by the way, and we will continue to work hard on that. Building our region's global footprint is a priority for the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. St. Louis's connectivity to international markets brings both dynamic talent and foreign investments to our region. The partnership's commitment to amplify our industry's verticals abroad took us to many countries in the last year. In November, we visited Buenos Aires and Rosario in Argentina, and Rosario became a sister city. In Buenos Aires, we signed an MOU between the partnership and the Undersecretariat of the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. We agreed to promote investment together and international trade. Over 30 St. Louisans joined us in Argentina, and last week we welcomed a delegation back from Argentina as they came to visit and learn in St. Louis. In May of 2018, a small delegation visited Dijon and the Greater Burgundy region of France to explore shared crop and bioscience innovation. There, we also signed an agreement with our counterparts, the Agence Économique Régionale, and so in both Argentina and France, we focused on leveraging our strengths in St. Louis in ag tech and food production to meet the demands of the growing population and the shrinking food supply. Also in May, the St. Louis Deputy Mayor, Linda Martinez, was welcomed in Amsterdam as she presented to the Startup City Summit. The summit featured 200 officials from over 100 cities in the world. And so our trade missions center on our industry strengths. This July, the prestigious Brookings Institution released a report recognizing our region's ag tech sector as one of the best in the U.S. and a model for other regions to look to grow their economies. The Brookings report said, for nearly 2 decades, St. Louis has patiently and collaboratively made strategic investments in the capital, facilities, and skills that agriculture technology cluster needs. So some have started calling this the Ag Coast of America because of our location in the center of the heartland and the density of grain and fertilizer facilities along the Mississippi River. But the Brookings report also hailed the density of entrepreneur support organizations focused on building the next generation of agri-food and ag tech companies. Organizations like BioSTL and the Danforth Plant Science Center, the Yield Lab, and our Helix Center. Additionally, the research universities, Washington University, University of Missouri, and St. Louis University, are equally important to building our next generation economy. Anticipating future trends continues to be a core focus of our World Trade Center. Tim and his group have secured a place for St. Louis in the Brookings Institution's Global City Initiative. As part of the Global Cities work, the World Trade Center developed a metro export plan and a foreign direct investment plan for St. Louis. We're now doing that work of those plans every day. So our region's ability to respond to markets is key, given St. Louis export goods and services is estimated at $16.1 billion. And right now, St. Louis ranks among the top 25 largest exporting metros. Because of our work with Brookings and J.P. Morgan Chase, we can see there's great potential for St. Louis to better leverage its competitive advantages. Every vertical of strength in our region has the potential to further accelerate our region's growth and to build our reputation domestically and internationally. My team and I always are here to help, so please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you. And when you do business around the world, let us know where we can make a St. Louis connection, because it takes all of us to ensure that St. Louis evolves with our global economy by developing that compelling global identity. The global identity of St. Louis will ultimately determine our relevance in international markets. Our region's global relevance is extremely important as we endeavor to make St. Louis a magnet and attract and retain multinational companies. And we cannot do this work alone, of course. Mayor Lyta Cruson is a really strong partner with us. She knows that in 2018, it's not enough to compete with our peer cities around the US. Our competitors are all over the world. Mayor Cruson is significantly involved in our work, including the Mosaic project, the Sister Cities, in promoting St. Louis as a place for foreign direct investment. This past year, she hosted numerous foreign delegations from China, Uganda, Kenya, and other countries. So with that, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce the Mayor of the City of St. Louis, Lyta Cruson.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm looking out on this crowd. I think I've been to this luncheon many times. I don't think I've ever seen it fuller than it is here today. So thank you to all of you for being here, and for all of our sponsors who are right behind us here. Thank you for supporting this event, and of course, Growing Global. Growing Global has become such an important event for the St. Louis business community by providing a forum for local, and in today's case, global leaders to discuss critical issues and their effects on international business. We know that St. Louis must be global to compete. Global in both our mindset and in our actions. That's why we were thrilled in May to relaunch direct flights to Europe via WOW Air. I know some of you have been on those flights, right? They're fabulous. And in St. Louis's central location within the U.S. provides quick and easy access to both coasts. Now with direct service to Iceland and connections to more than 20 markets across Europe and the Middle East, we're expanding our global access and connectivity. And as Sheila mentioned, I think maybe off script, we're still working on more connections there. So that was off script for me too. Speaking of connectivity, I want to personally welcome our 3 special guests this afternoon. Ambassador Wooters, right here. Ambassador Belgium, Ambassador Viscini, right there we go, and Commissioner Caro. Thank you so much, Commissioner, being here from Mexico. We are so grateful that you have taken the time to be with us today, and I personally really look forward to your insights and your advice, so thank you so much. As you're aware, many St. Louis companies have made investments in or do significant business with Belgium, the Greater European Union, and of course, Mexico. Well-known companies such as Anheuser-Busch, Emerson, Nestle Purina, and many other large and small companies that are represented here today. In both local and international government representatives, we have unique and complementary roles to play in enabling firms and cities to go global. I've made it a priority to support the international business community and to connect with foreign business delegations and leaders. Sheila mentioned a few that we've had the opportunity to connect with over the last year or so, and I think it is just a fabulous opportunity for St. Louis, but also for our foreign delegates. We know how important it is to build relationships and to maintain international relationships and connectivity. Most of you, you're all in business, you all know that it's all about relationships. It's all about getting to know one another to do more business together. The local economic impact from international business activity in St. Louis is very significant. In St. Louis, there are 50,000 jobs, are supported by nearly 300 foreign-owned companies from 30 different countries. And exports support nearly 94,000 jobs locally. So in short, communities that encourage trade and foreign investment create more jobs, more economic activity than those who don't. And St. Louis is doing just that. We have international investors from every continent. We are a growing, thriving, foreign-born community. We have university and business relationships that span the globe. I congratulate the World Trade Center today on your work and your support of the many partners to further internationalize St. Louis. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here today to show your support for this really important activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cruson. As Sheila Sweeney mentioned and the Brookings Institute confirmed, St. Louis has emerged as a global leader and foreign investment magnet in agricultural technology and plant science. In November, the World Trade Center St. Louis led a delegation of 36 to Argentina to tell this story on a global scale. Please take a look.
This is a diverse group of civic and business and academic leaders, but we do have a strong focus in ag technology because that's what the value proposition is. When you're looking at 5 days, 5 working days that when you look at the agenda, it's literally packed from morning until night. These are 12, 13-hour days. But even within that, you have to be selective. And so that's, again, where you rely heavily on the right partnerships, the right friendships.
Really, for us, as Monsanto, it's a pleasure to receive the St. Louis delegation as a company that was born in St. Louis 110 years ago.
It's Monsanto and Bunge and Nestle. They obviously have a major presence both in our community and in Argentina. But now we've seen some other earlier stage companies out of Argentina, particularly in ag technology, that have come to St. Louis, that have made a home within the Helix Center in 39 North, our new innovation district that has a strong focus on ag technology.
Argentina is undergoing a significant and strong path of change, and that change is signaled by its openness to the world.
I think this memorandum that we're going to sign today is the beginning of a working relationship with the city of St. Louis.
I really think to build the relationships and friendships between the Argentinian farmers and entrepreneurs and government officials and also corporate folks with those in St. Louis of the same interest.
We will establish ourselves in Latam, in Argentina, to promote Latam ag technology startups.
So the Sister City Agreement between Rosario and the St. Louis region is more than a recognition of our similarities. It's a challenge to all of us to see just how much we can accomplish to our mutual benefit academically and culturally.
So this is really about job creation, it's about economic development, and it's about building a very globally thinking St. Louis.
Hello and welcome back to Growing Global 2018. As lunch is winding down here, we're going to give you a little bit of a preview about what's coming up next. We are joined now by Susan Spitz from World Trade Center St. Louis. Susan, impressive gathering.
Yeah, we've actually never had this many people. This is kind of a record event for us, so we're very, very excited about that.
One of the things that always strikes me when we look out on these gatherings is just the sheer force of people and organizations that are part of this effort to really make St. Louis a pivotal player, in the global economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's reflective of how much we already are that pivotal player, and you'll hear from all of the speakers on all of the different things that are going on. It's just really amazing. You know, we have so much to offer, but also the world has a lot to offer, and so the two of us working together, you know, it's a global place, and we're definitely a big part of it. So it's fun to see all of that on display here.
I know you have some great partnerships and sponsors who are making today possible. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we have some major sponsors that you can imagine because they're big players in the region, like Bayer and Monsanto and Boeing and Ameren and large organizations like that. And then we also have some newer organizations to our sponsorship, but they're still international players, like Flat World Holdings, for instance, that does a lot of different things internationally. Scarborough is another one of our new sponsors that also is right in the middle of all the international stuff, and so it's been a very exciting year.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us. Good luck with the rest of today's program. Yeah, thank you.
Everyone.
Debbie Monterey is our moderator, and she is going to get things going for us right now.
I hope you're enjoying your lunch. I know some of you have to get back to the office today, so we want to make sure to move ahead with our program, and we have a lot of interesting and exciting things to get to. My name is Debbie Monterey, and I am the morning host of Total Information AM on KMOX Radio. Any KMOX listeners here today? Yay! And KMOX is proud to be one of the media sponsors here, and also I am bad at keeping track, but Tim assures me that this is my 13th year emceeing this event, so I'll trust him with the numbers. So I am thrilled to be back again because this is a wonderful event. I MC a lot of events throughout the community throughout the year. I've never had a 13-year-in-a-row streak because I love this event, and if this is your first time, I think you will too. And I really enjoy working with Tim and Stella and the whole team at the World Trade Center St. Louis. They just do an amazing job year after year. But before we get started, I do have some people to thank, and we have to acknowledge the people who help to make this luncheon possible every year. First, let's recognize the World Trade Center St. Louis's Board of Directors. There are a lot of them. So just if you look in your program, we just want to make sure that they get their recognition. And if you are a board member, could you just raise your hand and wave? All right, let's hear it for the board members. It takes a lot of time and commitment to do all of these things, so we certainly appreciate all of their efforts. We would also like to take a moment to recognize, in addition to our honored speakers, we have a number of special guests with us today, and we appreciate them taking the time to be here, including, and then when I announce your name, just give a little wave. We have Kit Bond, retired U.S. Senator. We have Steve Ellman, St. Charles County Executive. Kenny Helsoff, former United States House of Representatives. Also Russ Carnahan, former United States House of Representatives. I know I saw Russ out in the lobby. Todd Martin from the office of Senator Claire McCaskill. We have Mary Beth Luna Wolf from the office of Senator Roy Blunt. Also, Martin Salum from the World Trade Center Association. And we have representatives from the St. Louis Honorary Consul Corps as well. So a round of applause for all of our special guests here with us today. Well, this year the World Trade Center St. Louis is grateful for the support of a lot of leading companies. As you heard Tim mention earlier, we have record attendance, but also record sponsorship. So we really thank the companies who are committed to furthering the mission of World Trade Center St. Louis. So this year, growing global sponsors include our presenting sponsor, it's WayC Health Management. Also global sponsors, Bayer and JP Morgan Chase. Our international level sponsors include America's Central Port, BU Mariu, BKD, Brian Cave Leighton Paisner, Centene, CGS Infotech, Clayco and Bates Forum, and Edward Jones. Also, many thanks to Emerson, HEC TV, who put together an amazing video earlier that we loved, Metro, Nestle Purina, RGA, St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, Boeing Company, and our domestic level sponsors include ACI Plastics, Ameren, Bi-State Development, CSI Leasing, Flat World Holdings, HOK, Kit Bond Strategies, Missouri Department of Economic Development, Nidec Motor Corporation, the St. Louis Regional Chamber, and United Technology. Our media, in-kind, and civic sponsors include KMOX, the Voice of St. Louis, the Boeing Institute of International Business at St. Louis University, the St. Louis Business Journal, St. Louis County, and St. Louis City. A round of applause to all of our sponsors. All right, just a show of hands, how many of you have been to this event before? Oh my gosh, all right, so we have a lot of repeat customers, so you know we like to give stuff away, and you're probably wondering this year, what are they gonna give away? All right, so here it is. We've, for 5 years in a row, we gave away some Southwest Airlines tickets, right? Just to thank you for attending Growing Global, but this year we are going international. I know, the excitement builds here. After all, it is the World Trade Center, right? And as Mayor Cruson mentioned, WOW Air began service to St. Louis in May, and they have generously donated 4 round-trip tickets to Iceland. I know, is it just me, or did all summer long you see on your Facebook feed people in Iceland? All of my friends were in Iceland. So maybe you're going too now. So here's what we're gonna do. All of you got one of these magazines. This is the Gateway to the Best magazine, so pull it out. It might have a little wrapper around it. Go ahead and rip that wrapper right off. And then on the back page, inside back page, if you see a WOW logo taped to the inside back page, you are a winner of 2 round-trip tickets to Iceland. And if it's you, stand up and scream so we can see you. We need your recognition. We need to know we have 4 winners in the room. All right, we have one in the back. Who else? I see 1 winner. And I know you may be afraid to out yourself because people will be wanting to tag along, but please, we just need to make sure that we have 4 winners of round-trip tickets to Iceland. Oh, we have 1 over here. All right, that's 2. Congratulations. Oh, wait, it's 2 tickets. All right. All right, everybody good? I know, it's disappointing, right? I didn't get one either, but we'll all get to Iceland one of these days. So congratulations and a big thank you to our friends at WOW Air. Now, yes. So all of our sponsors are identified in the program, so we hope that aside from looking through this great magazine, you take some time to look through your program and see who is sponsoring all of this and making all of this possible. Keep that excitement going, though, because it is now my pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director of World Trade Center St. Louis. You know him, you love him. It's Mr. Tim Nowak.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much. Clearly, the beard didn't work, all right? Maybe not in Argentina, but maybe in Iceland. For those of you who won, I'd love to go to Iceland. I've never been to Iceland. I think the beard would work there, all right? Look, 2018 marks the 25th anniversary of the World Trade Center St. Louis and the 20th anniversary of Growing Global. A big thank you to Debbie Monterey again for emceeing more than half of the 20 Growing Global luncheons. She's always done a fantastic job. Thank you, Debbie. And I want to recognize the World Trade Center team, who each year, under the leadership of Stella Sheehan, organizes and executes what has become the largest annual international business gathering in St. Louis. Thank you to Stella, Sean Mullins, Betsy Cohen, Vin Coe, Susan Spitz, Karen Gentles, and Bomi Park. The size and scope of this event is a direct result of your dedication and your hard work. Over the past 25 years, we have witnessed the profound effects of an increasingly interconnected global economy. Depending on one's perspective, globalization represents an opportunity to pry open new markets for exports or source goods and services at a lower cost. Globalization can be viewed as an opportunity for new work and innovation or a threat to one's current job or career. It can be viewed as drawing us all closer, creating a better understanding of our differences, or an unwanted intrusion on deeply rooted cultural traditions. No matter your perspective, globalization is a potent force, transforming our societies and commercial activities in countless ways. Companies and communities find themselves mandatory participants in this new global marketplace. And while all cities are affected by globalization, not all are seizing its benefits. In St. Louis, I'm proud to note we have chosen to embrace it. By launching the World Trade Center St. Louis in 1993 and housing it within the City-County Economic Development Agency, known as the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, the region responded with a vision and a commitment to global engagement. Beyond this vision, the World Trade Center has taken the lead on strategy development to encourage and support new trade activity, increased investment, and foreign-born talent. And today, we take the opportunity to highlight a few of those examples. 6 years ago, in partnership with many local leaders, we formed the St. Louis Mosaic Project, an initiative to make St. Louis the fastest growing metro area for immigration by 2020. People remain the most important ingredient to any community. Those who can attract and retain the best and the brightest from around the globe are better prepared to compete in a global economy dominated by information, technology, and new ideas. This afternoon, we're joined by two women who had one of those new ideas. Annie Schlafly and Susan Gobo, herself a trailing spouse of a Nestle Purina executive, saw the need to connect and integrate international spouses who moved to St. Louis. In 2016, Susan formed the St. Louis International Spouses Program. And in 2017, Annie formed the International Mentor Program. Now, working together and with the strong support and resources from Mosaic, more than 200 women from 48 countries are enrolled, becoming part of the community and connecting with local mentors. With programs like this for international spouses, the Mosaic Project is shaping our future by welcoming and integrating new talent and their families to this region. And it's already bearing fruit, with an unprecedented response locally and nationally, placing St. Louis among the top 5 fastest growing metros for foreign-born each of the past 2 years. To increase investment and expand the region's economic base, last year, we published St. Louis's first ever comprehensive foreign direct investment plan. This plan is the result of our work with Brookings Institute, JP Morgan Chase, and the prestigious Global Cities Initiative. Now, you heard from Sheila earlier today about a number of the strategies that we have employed in the past year since launching this plan. As a result of this work, we welcome one of our newest investors to St. Louis. Cgs Infotech is a global technology company based in Mumbai, India, with more than 5,000 clients in 40 countries. Working with our partners at the St. Louis Regional Chamber and Missouri Partnership, we met Hiten Bhutta, the chief executive of CGS, and his team in June at the Select USA Investment Summit in Washington, D.C. Following a visit to St. Louis and an introduction to many local connections, including Rankin Technical College, CGS is in the process now of opening offices at Cortex and launching a digital tourism marketing program that includes 20 Rankin students. Hiten and his team are here with us today, and we welcome you to St. Louis. Finally, we often say that trade and investment begin with relationships. Mayor Cruson highlighted this as well. For the World Trade Center, in no other project has this been truer than the consulting deal between WeiC Health Management in Suzhou, China, and the Washington University School of Medicine and Siteman Cancer Center. This story began 15 years ago with an international student from Suzhou, China, named Eric Tong Zhang. While completing his MBA at Washington University, Eric collaborated with me in the International Healthcare Department at Barnes Jewish Hospital, and ultimately worked in our office for another year after graduating. Eric has always maintained a connection and a love of St. Louis and the many relationships he developed during his time here. When asked by the China National Development Bank and WeiC Healthcare's to help lead a search for a medical school partner in the United States, it was Eric who championed St. Louis and the connections to Washington University. Healthcare is a center of innovation and technology in St. Louis. It represents a strong opportunity for future global investment and service-related exports to China and throughout the world. Through this new medical consulting agreement, we are seeing firsthand the advantages of these long-term relationships and St. Louis's greater global connectivity. WeiC Health Management and Siteman Cancer Center leaders are here with us today, and both groups are actually headed back to Suzhou next week for additional work. Congratulations to Eric, Mr. Liu Chengli, and the entire Washington University School of Medicine and Siteman Cancer Center team. Growing global is challenging. Macroeconomic forces such as regulations, free trade agreements, and immigration laws are still beyond the control of any one given community. But cities that prioritize global engagement will, over time, seize the benefits, including increased exports, foreign investment, global talent, and playing an active role in international networks that foster innovation. The combined strategies led by the World Trade Center seek to prepare St. Louis for long-term economic growth tied to global rather than just national economies. Thank you for your tremendous support over the past 25 years and your continued partnership during the next.
All right, thank you, Tim. All right, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the recipient of the World Trade Center St. Louis's 2018 Global Ambassador Award. As with years past, the World Trade Center has dedicated a tree in the name of the award winner on Government Hill near the World's Fair Pavilion in Forest Park. Those trees represent the efforts made by each recipient to grow St. Louis's image as a globally connected community. For the past 4.5 decades, Dr. Joel Glassman has worked at the University of Missouri St. Louis, the last 25 plus as the director of the Office of International Studies and Programs. International has always been in his blood. Dr. Glassman received his PhD in 1974 from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, after completing his dissertation on education policy in China. During his distinguished career, he has also published extensively, including research on education in China, U.S. foreign policy in East Asia, and U.S. economic relations with Pacific Rim countries. Through his work directing the university's Office of International Student and Scholarship Services, Dr. Glassman has really elevated the university's global profile and significantly increased the number of foreign students choosing UMSL for higher education and choosing St. Louis as their home. Beyond his career, Dr. Glassman has also contributed significantly to this community and its increased global understanding. As the longtime chair of the St. Louis Nanjing China Sister City Committee, Dr. Glassman has led many academic, cultural, and business exchanges. The St. Louis Nanjing Sister City Agreement is the very first between the United States and the People's Republic of China, and next year celebrates its 40th anniversary. So we are very proud of this distinction and of Dr. Glassman, who's been instrumental in many of its activities, including the 1992 collaboration between UMSL and Nanjing University student and faculty exchanges. The list of Dr. Glassman's community work to enhance St. Louis's global standing is very long and very impressive. Among some of them, he's a founding steering committee member of the Mosaic Project, the Japan-American Society, World Trade Center St. Louis, World Affairs Council, and the list goes on and on. That's just a small sampling, but the fact is many of you already know Joel and have probably worked with Joel before, so you already know how deserving he is to be added to this distinguished list of St. Louis Global Ambassador Award winners. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to present the 2018 Global Ambassador Award to Dr. Joel Glassman.
I want to thank the Board of Directors and staff of the World Trade Center for this recognition. I am genuinely honored. I moved to St. Louis more than 45 years ago to serve as a faculty member at UMSL. At that time, St. Louis was not a very internationally oriented city, and UMSL was not an especially internationalized university. Both have changed in the intervening years, and I hope I have played some small part, especially at UMSL, in facilitating that transformation. During these years, UMSL has built a network of international partnerships, recruited many faculty members who are international experts, established endowed professorships in international studies, promoted study abroad for our own students, and attracted a steady cohort of international students to study on our campus. We have transformed our university with the strong support of our faculty and administration, especially Chancellors Tuhill and George, but also through our partnerships with many community organizations, such as the World Trade Center, Project Mosaic, the World Affairs Council, and Sister City programs. We are the community outreach university for St. Louis that tries not to go it alone and that lives by the motto, better together. Today, of course, St. Louis has no choice but to engage in the global arena. We are, as indicated by Tim, pursuing the foreign-born to study, live, and work here. We're seeking to grow our international trade and working to attract foreign investment. And perhaps most importantly, we are growing regional cooperation to to make all of this happen. As the UMSL Director of International Studies and Programs, I have encouraged UMSL to be a good partner in these larger regional undertakings, even as we have evolved into a truly international university. So thank you again for honoring me, as well as recognizing the role that UMSL plays in internationalizing this community. Thank you.
Congratulations. All right, I would now like to invite today's featured panelists to join me up on stage. And for those of you who have been here before, you know that for the past 2 years, Growing Global has hosted a panel format discussion as opposed to a keynote speaker. And it has been a really, really interesting and fascinating thing for me, and I think for the audience as well. And today we are going to explore the topic Political Economy of Trade with a panel of experts from the region's leading trading partners. Now, can you even, I don't know how long ago you picked this topic, but it doesn't seem like it could be more timely. The politics of trade, and the panel will address the current trade environment, strategic trade policies, economic implications of globalization, also the challenges that this presents on a global stage and here in the St. Louis area. So joining me on stage right now is the Belgian ambassador to the United States, Dirk Wouters. Thank you. Also, Caroline Vicini, who is the ambassador and deputy head of delegation for the European Union to the United States. And also Martin Caro, who is Trade and Investment Commissioner of Pro Mexico, or Mexico, right? Pro Mexico. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with Ambassador Wouters, but of course I would love for all of you to feel free to chime in if there is something that you would like to add. Because one of the goals that we really hope to accomplish today was to get a better understanding of the current trade landscape and the politics involved, because this has become maybe more political than many of us remember being in recent times. So my first question, Ambassador, is why have the words globalization and trade suddenly become bad words? Oh, I think you're mic'd. You should be good.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Debbie. Let me first make one remark, and I think I'm also speaking on behalf of Caroline and Martin, and that is I would like to express words of sympathy for all the victims of Hurricane Florence. I mean, I know that there are many people here in this community that still remember the damage that floods can do also to a city like St. Louis. I think it was '93. So, words of sympathy. To your question, why has it become so contentious? For example, free trade, and why has it caught the public attention? I think there are different factors. I like to mention first technology, especially automation and digitization. I think that plays a role. But trade or free trade is often the default reaction. And there are more people that criticize trade than technology. I mean, I don't know about you, Debbie, but I never hear criticizing the iPhone of the people. Maybe you criticize your iPhone. I don't criticize my iPhone.
So when it doesn't work right.
Yeah. But it's a default reaction. But there are, of course, other factors. I think that, of course, the development the last 30 years of the global supply chains, which many business people are very familiar, has kind of allowed to take decisions in the allocation of resources of one company, a global company, to invest elsewhere. An example is when you take a decision to invest in Mexico automobiles instead of another, and then of course it may have some effects. Also, there is a question of pace in today's world. We heard in the interventions a lot of developments for the Metro St. Louis and Missouri community, and I was thinking, well, this is going really fast in your reach out to the rest of the world. And the pace can be a problem when you try to kind of oversee internationally with rules that keep up with new developments like e-commerce and other developments in trade. So that's also a factor. And then I would also like to mention, I mean, and we see in Europe, not just in the United States, there is this, well, politicians have a bit changed their view on free trade. I mean, and that's also a factor when I hear that all free trade agreements of the past are not good anymore. Then of course it tells you something about the conviction on free trade. But there is this, especially in Europe. I mean, I left Europe in 2016, and it was a bad year for Europe, a horrible year. And I felt, and I was discussing it with the mayor at the table, that a lot of the criticism against globalization and everything that went wrong came at the same time with the huge expectation that public authorities and local communities and cities and states would give more security and protection, and security in the widest sense of the word, also economic security, back to the people. And that's what I think you're all trying to achieve here, and I have to compliment you with your acting local, thinking global approach. Thank you.
Anything either of you would like to add about why those words have become bad words?
Yeah. First of all, hi everyone. I'm representing the European Union, and I think I just want to situate this in the context we have here, because in Europe, as you know, we are 28 member states. Our last member state is Croatia, that joined in 2013, and we form a single market. So there is a free flow of goods, of financial resources, money, services, and it allows people to go and live wherever they want and work wherever they want within these 28 states. We also negotiate trade agreements for all the 28. That's the Commission's prerogative to do that. Just so to understand from where I come. And of course, this is also an issue that the European Union has dealt with and is dealing with on a daily basis. How can we convince people that globalization is good, and how can we convince people that free trade is good? And I very much agree with what Dirk, Ambassador Wouters, said, that I think the development is too fast for people, really, to be able to feel comfortable. We moved forward already earlier. I mean, during my whole lifetime, things have moved forward, but not at the speed we see now. And it always, when I meet these tech people, it always kind of scares me when they say, you know, it's never going to go as slow as it goes today. And I think that, you know, people, you worry. I worry about my young adult daughters, what's their world going to look like. And I think all this insecurity makes people to want to go backwards and sort of come back to some kind of image of the 50s or 60s that we had. But for God's sake, with an iPhone in one hand and eating avocado and mango, etc. But just bring us back there. And I think that is a little bit the conundrum we are in now, and it sort of speaks to people's feelings rather than to their intellect.
Can you hear me well? Well, first of all, thank you for the World Trade Center for having us. And before addressing the question, for us in Mexico, Missouri is a great example of how free trade is successful, how free trade works, how NAFTA works. Since NAFTA was enacted, trade with Mexico from Missouri, export from Missouri to Mexico has grown more than 500%. Mexico is the second largest market for Missouri exporters. It's the #1 market for crops and food. So that is a really, really good example how free trade works. And more than actually 100,000 jobs on Missouri depend on trade with Mexico. So this is just an example of how free trade needs to be seen as a good thing, because it's not only exports to Mexico, it's also Mexican companies investing here There are around 2,000 jobs in Missouri that depends on Mexican companies. You have Gruma, you have Cemex, you have Bimbo here. Sara Lee, as you know, the brand is owned by a Mexican company that has operations here in Missouri. So that is a good example of how Missouri has been really, really successful in terms of trade, and in Mexico especially. And coming back to your question and following on the same order of ideas, I think people are always scared of change, basically, right? Of things that they don't know. And free trade is basically change. Free trade challenges you to become more competitive, to be out of your comfort zone, to become a better company, a better professional. And I think it's natural for a lot of people that to feel scared or to see the word of free trade in a bad way, because that means change on their professional lives, on their regular lives, et cetera, et cetera. We need to take care of people also to become a more competitive professional globally. And that's basically what I think they see free trade.
Well, Martin, you mentioned NAFTA, so I have to ask about that because it has certainly been in the headlines lately, but many of us probably are not following the latest as closely as you are. So is NAFTA officially dead? What can you speak to as far as this new agreement between just the U.S. and Mexico, and what does that mean for Canada?
Sure.
And Missouri, of course.
Sure. Well, as my job is basically to promote trade and investment between our countries. So you can imagine how interesting my job has become in the last 18 months, right? Well, I would say exciting, right? Exciting because every new day I'm learning things that I didn't know on business or on trade. Something that on my career, that is all the things that I learn about that. I'm learning new stuff every day. Every hour, actually. With every tweet, I'm learning new stuff. But so actually, there is no formal trade right now. We are drafting the fine print as we speak. What we had basically was an agreement on an agreement, how to solve key issues that were not damaging, but issues that need to be addressed in order to improve the U.S.-Mexico economic relationship. NAFTA is a trade agreement that has been in place 25 years, so it needs to be modernized. Back when NAFTA was enacted, we didn't have e-commerce. For example, we didn't have Amazon, we didn't have eBay. The energy sector in Mexico was closed. Infrastructure in Mexico was not as big as it is today, the middle class, for example. So there is a need to modernize NAFTA. NAFTA is still there because we are still waiting for Canada, if Canada wants to join. But the most complex issues on these negotiations were between Mexico and the US, basically, especially in the automotive sector. So we managed to overcome that, but we are still waiting for Canada if they want to join. But Mexico has always insisted that the name of the game is to have the three countries together, because if we want to become competitive, we have to compete as a region, not as an individual country. So we always will try to push to have Canada in the agreement as well.
All right. Now, Caroline, you mentioned the free flow of trade in the members of the EU. Can you speak to what increased barriers could mean, whether within the European Union or with trading partners around the world? How does that impact investment, and how might we see that on a more local level?
Yeah, that is something that we hope we will not see more of. Within the European Union, we have decided that there should be no barriers, and we are working constantly on removing those barriers. For example, now there's a new legislation coming out on, you were talking about e-trade, for example, that when you should be able to buy things over the internet within the European Union, and you should not, for example, be what they call geo-blocked, which means that if you live in a certain part of the European Union, you cannot buy stuff, you won't see the prices and can't buy stuff from other parts. That they are taking away, trying to improve the flow of packages, etc. So if I want to buy, a bathing suit from Spain sitting in Sweden, well, I can order it over the internet and it comes to me, and the whole market is open to me. Talking about obstacles, we see already the result of obstacles coming up. The steel and aluminum tariffs that the US has now imposed on not only on the European Union, but a number of other countries, Mexico as well. You have now seen, since I got the last statistics now for that, there has been a 25% jump in exclusion requests from mid-July to now. Since this was introduced in the middle of March, there has been 29,000 requests on exemptions for steel, 3,500 requests for exemptions on aluminium. It concerns 753 companies. And if anybody of you have filled out one of these forms, you know you don't know it if you don't need it. There is a timeline that's supposed to be 90 days for getting an exemption or not getting an exemption. They're not able to cope with that. So you have numerous companies that are sitting needing really specialized type of steel from somewhere in the world, and they can't get it, and they don't know when they are going to get it, and they don't know if they are going to get it at all. And if you think that is something that promotes trade, or promotes even market economy, or promotes good business practice, or that is not what it is to me. So these are the artificial obstacles that are put up with these tariffs, for example. Then there are other tariffs that there are no exemptions from. And all those who are depending, for example, now on deliveries from China for parts of their own manufacturing or what they are doing, well, they will get price increases, because who is buying? When you put on extra tariffs, who is paying? It's not the seller, it's the buyer is paying. So this is a tax on American companies, although nobody is illustrating it like that. I would say also another result of barriers coming up like that, it is that protectionism, exactly as we just heard, protectionism is decreasing the competitiveness of companies, because you are not forced to innovate. You can exist in a sheltered world, and you lose in competitiveness with the world outside. You have the Jones Act in the United States that is protecting your merchant fleet. That's why it's more expensive to send a ton of goods to Hawaii than to send a ton of goods from California to China. Because it's a protected market. There's no competition in the US merchant fleet. And this is what's happening.
Ambassador Wouters, we've certainly seen some back and forth between the U.S. and the EU, and some more back and forth between the U.S. and China, with more tariffs and more talk of different sectors of trade that will be affected. So this might be kind of crystal balling it, and if Carolyn and Martine have anything to add, please do. But where do you see this ending, and what do you see as the ultimate impact globally of what we've been experiencing these last couple of years?
Well, thank you. I hope we will not end in a situation where tariff becomes an active verb. But it is probably, as we speak, I guess it's rather difficult to see what the end game is in this trade war between China and the United States. Why is that? Because there is not enough information available, I think, on the kind of policy measures that China might be considering in order to satisfy, let's say, the American request. So, and on the other hand, I don't think that the Chinese have told their American interlocutors what in the chain of pain for them, with the kind of economy they have, which is not a market economy, quite frankly, what they could consider as a concession in order to go back to a better situation. And so we, on both sides, I think some information and clarity is still missing. But what we can say today is that the issues with China are not new. I mean, the market, the Chinese economy is not as transparent as it should be for a quote-unquote market economy. There are still so many issues on intellectual property. There are still issues on the question of currency manipulation, although it has been improved, I think, the dialogue with the United States on that in the past. But the issues are still out there, and I think the real measure of success in the relationship between these two big economies is whether the Chinese economy can become more transparent when the Chinese economy, well, there are less issues on intellectual property, there are less issues on the transfer of technology. That's the measure, I think, of progress in the. And these are kind of systemic issues on which, in Europe, we would agree that there are systemic issues which have to be seriously addressed. But maybe our prescription is slightly different. I think we would like to see that we move from the present landscape in the world on trade, where you had probably some progress in the Mexico-US front. You have a truce between the temporary but fragile truce between the United States and the European Union. But we have to move to a much better situation with the United States, with Mexico, Canada, so that we can all together, and hopefully again under the leadership, as in the past of the United States, address these systematic issues. But I don't think that tariffs will solve the issue. I mean, I still remember, I conclude, I think it was President Clinton, if I may, who once said that globalization is like the forces of nature, wind, water. And then he was going on in 2001 when China was becoming a member of the World Trade Organization. He was very much in favor with the argument that we would pin down, the rest of the world would pin down China on the lower tariffs of the organization of which China would become a member. And so the idea was that then the deficit of the United States, the trade deficit with China, could improve. Now, since 2001, unfortunately, the deficit with China has leapt to fivefold. So, well, it's not only economists that can be wrong in predicting the future. Usually they often are, but one can make a mistake in predicting. But I don't think that if the goal of China, among others, is to get access to Western technology, that imposition of tariffs, which will most probably affect intermediate goods that are traded within global companies, that this will solve the problem of the trade deficit of the United States. So we have to look at the more systematic, so that we have for the business community of the United States working in China, working with China, better respect of what a market economy should be. And we have to move to a better place also, because if we don't move to a better place compared to the one we have, with still risk of more tariffs on, I don't know, on cars, and we still have the steel and aluminum, I think the work you're all doing in the business community with the rest of the world may become more difficult in the future, because once you have tariffs, well, they're there, but very difficult to roll them back and to come back to a situation where probably it was a bit easier to do international and free trade. Thank you.
Martin, all this talk about the trade deficit, part of what has been apparently driving the talk of tariffs has been that reducing the trade deficit. We hear the president often say that other countries are taking advantage of the United States, and particularly China and Mexico. Can you address that a little bit? And give your perspective on what that all means?
No, thank you for giving the opportunity to share our thoughts about the trade deficit, because we don't usually have the platforms to really explain what trade deficit means, and especially when most of the administration policies towards trade are focused on reducing the trade deficit. And I will try to explain really, really simple. So Mexico is 110 million people, more or less. It has an economy that is 15 times smaller than the US. But even though Mexico manages to buy twice as much per capita from the US than the US buys from Mexico. So that means in Mexico, per person, we buy around $2,000 worth of American goods per person. And in the US, you buy almost $1,000 per person of Mexican goods. So if you want to fix the trade deficit, you really need to focus on larger economies or even larger countries. Because if you want to fix the trade deficit, in this case with Mexico, each Mexican people will need to buy even 4 times what you are buying right now, with an economy that is 15 times smaller. And even with those numbers in mind, Mexico is the second largest buyer of US goods in the world, and it's going to become #1 on the next 5 years. So it's really hard to just fix the trade deficit just by the sense of fixing it, because you need to follow the economics behind that. And I'm going to give you more examples of that. Mexico is around, of the whole total trade of the US, Mexico is 9% of the total deficit. But if you take into account only Mexico and the US trade relationship, Mexico sells 12% more of Mexican goods to the US than the US, and vice versa. But so there is a trade deficit. But if you compare that with countries such as Korea, Korea is only 4% of the total trade deficit. But if you take only Korean and US trade, Korea sells 25% more to you guys. Or if you take Germany, because you're buying a lot of luxury cars from Germany, so Germany is like Mexico. It's like 9–10% of the total trade deficit, but Germany is selling 45% more to you than you are selling to Germany. So that's the kind of trade deal that you need to focus on, more developed economies. Or for example, if you take China, that you were talking about China, China is 50% of the trade deficit that the US has. But if you take in consideration only China and the US, China sells almost 70% more to the US than the US to China. So yes, there are trade deficit. Yes, there is a trade deficit in Mexico, but as you can see, it's way different from the rest of the countries. And I'm going to explain you even further. Why is this different? For every dollar that Mexico exports to the world, almost half of that dollar is American content. So that means, now that we're talking about Germany, and I was talking to the honorary consul around here, BMW is building a brand new plant in the center of Mexico. So over there, they're going to produce the BMW 3 Series, that is a small BMW. That's going to be a global platform. That means BMW is going to export through Mexico to 123 countries around the world that vehicle. So every single vehicle that BMW makes in Mexico and is going to be sent back to the US, to Brazil, to Europe, the Middle East, is going to be made in the US. Because the more we export from Mexico, the more you export to the world as well. That's why trade deficit is not precisely as how you read it on the news, because again, we make things together. And that's how we have to see it as an overall.
All right, before we run out of time, and I have a million more questions, but I want to end by asking each of you to think about some advice that you could give to the folks here in the room. We have about 700 people here who clearly are interested or involved with the globalization of our world and bringing it closer to home. Act local, think global. So let's start with Caroline. What can you tell either our business people, our elected and civic leaders here in the room? What advice do you have on what they could do to influence trade policy at a national level and make their voice heard that would be impactful?
Well, I think we are we have a perfect timing here. There are elections coming up in a few months, and you here, if you see what you pay in new tariffs because of what has been introduced by this administration, Missourian companies pay $1 billion extra after the new tariffs per year. That's the calculation that the American Chamber of Commerce has made. So I'm not, what you got from the administration when it comes to the tax reform, which I believe was very much welcome from everybody who are in business, that is going to be eaten up by the tariffs. I think this is a city born on trade because your founder actually came here to create a trade imperium with France and Europe to sell fur and to bring in European products. So you are a city based on trade. And I think you should ask, before you go voting, you should ask your candidates, what is your position on trade? Are you aware of this? You need to speak for us in Washington and vote for the person who stands up for free trade, because I think that is fundamental for a city and for a state that actually tries and is truly global. So I would like, it doesn't have anything to do with European Union. It's a question of saving the international trade system we have. There's a grave threat against the WTO, which is sort of providing the traffic rules for international trade. It might not function optimally. We all come to crossings that we don't understand. Why is there a four-way stop here? It shouldn't be. But it's the best we have. And as Ambassador Wouters said, if we let this break down, it will be almost impossible to build it up again. And the US is a very, very strong economic actor. It's a very strong political actor. But when you are a giant, you have to be a gentle giant. You cannot step on things that you cannot put together again. So I would say, use your vote, and also those who will stay, because there are others who will remain. Request from them to stand up for free trade.
Ambassador Wouters, any thoughts?
Yes, but normally I'm very cautious in giving advice to a strong and a powerful community as this in St. Louis. But if I may, I think it is important that to continue to highlight that a lot of your relationships and the relationships of the United States with its allies are, in the first place, investment relationships, and that creating jobs in respective places of where the companies are established, and that the trade, a lot of the trade, if not most of the trade, takes place between the companies that have invested on both sides. And I think one has to continue to highlight this. And second, well, there are, of course, sometimes interesting practices. Last week I was with a Belgian global company in the chemical sector, and they had their annual meeting, not as big as this one, of course, but and they looked a bit exhausted and said, what happened to you? Yes, we brought all our North American people today to Washington, and as part of their training, they had 226 conversations with staffers on the Hill. I was really impressed, because they had to explain what the company was doing, that they were already, because they're a global company working in China, US, and Europe, they were already paying twice tariffs, because often the business model is one of, I take something I import from one country, add value in another, and re-export it to the, so that is useful. And if I may conclude on the young people. I mean, when I was young, and even at school or at university, we had more or less a good idea of what advantages were of free trade. And one could say exactly the same of agriculture. I mean, we had an idea that, okay, it feeds people and it landscapes nicely the country, agriculture, and so it performs positive functions. But today, I'm not sure that, or at least not in my country, but I guess in many other countries, that the young people know some of the really advantages of free trade or of agriculture. And maybe, maybe that the strong leaders that I see before me can also do their part in trying to educate a bit the young people on the things that matter for the future in this global world. Thank you.
All right, last word, Martin. Any advice for our audience?
Well, more than an advice is a thought that North America as an economic bloc it's in a unique position of economic leadership to compete against other blocs in the world. Why? And why NAFTA works is because we have been able to allocate our resources in a more efficient and competitive way. We have infrastructure, we have energy, we have skilled labor, competitive labor, we have R&D. So as I was saying, the name of the game is to compete as a bloc. And I think we need to work towards that to strengthen our position as a bloc, because in order to be successful in the upcoming years, we need to be together to, again, allocate our resources more efficiently and to work diligently as a NAFTA bloc. Because if we try to compete as an individual nations, or a range of competitiveness will decrease. And that's why NAFTA has been really setting an example around the world. And in that regards, Mexico is still committed and will be committed to defend these free trade policies, not only with NAFTA, also with the European Union. We just re-signed the modernization of our agreement. So that's my final thought, because at least in Mexico, NAFTA was more than a free trade agreement, not paying duties treaty. It was a tool that allowed Mexico to become a most modern economy, a more prosperous country, a rising middle class that is actually buying more American products because of the middle class. So again, myself, I'm a byproduct of NAFTA because I was working in a port. So that's what free trade brings to countries and to communities. And I think as a final thought is that we have to commit to that idea.
Martin Caro, Caroline Vicini, and Dirk Wouters, thank you so much for your time today, and we appreciate your thoughts and your words. Can you give a round of applause to our esteemed panel? Now, before we let you go, we do have a gift for each of you. These are glass bowls from Third Degree Glass Factory here in St. Louis, and they were specially made in the unique colors of your respective countries. So we hope that they make an excellent addition to your office. Aren't those beautiful? So we'll get some photos, but for the rest of you in the audience, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today and for staying through the panel. We hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and thank you for attending the 2018 Growing Global, and we'll see you next year. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you for joining us for HEC Media's live stream coverage of Growing Global 2018. We hope you will continue this conversation on Twitter at WTCSTL, and please share your photos and feedback at #STL Growing Global, and also at HEC_TV, on Facebook at facebook.com WTCSTL, and by visiting the World Trade Center St. Louis website at worldtradecenter-stl.com, and of course, please by joining us at our website, hecmedia.org, where you will find links to all of those social media platforms. Once again, thank you for joining us. I'm Brenda Madden.